Who was the worst house guest you ever had over? Story 1. Absolutely, without a doubt, one of my younger brother's friends from high school. Before he moved in with us, he seemed like a fine enough kid from a less-than-ideal home situation. His mom jumped from boyfriend to boyfriend and decided to move across the country midway through his junior year of high school. If he went with her, he would have ended up delaying his graduation by 6 months to a year, so my parents offered to let him stay with us. To frame the rest of the story, and to explain how much I dislike this kid, the TLDR is that he's the reason my dog is not alive. The kid was the worst type of house guest, incredibly possessive of his space, which he would basically bar whenever he was gone, even though his room was the only way for us to get to the hot water heater and boiler. He behaved like a neat freak, but was secretly a huge slob. He hid half-finished beers underneath the bathroom sink for a year, and the types of bugs that gathered pretty much ruined the lower floor of the house. He would sit on his bed and smoke so much weed and then completely pretend that it didn't happen, even when we found a lit bowl sitting next to him. He would ask my parents for money constantly. His mother decided he needed nothing at all since he wasn't her problem anymore, and he spent it on substances or on building a $1,000 gaming PC. Here's the awful John Wick Old Yeller bit of it all. He constantly ate chicken wings and would leave the bones just on the floor next to his bed, persistently, for months, even after my mom asked him not to. One morning, he dropped his 10-piece wing bones scattered around his bed like some awful Santeria ritual, and my dog found them. He was downstairs getting ready from school and saw my dog choking and just walked out to the bus. Didn't tell anyone. My mom found my dog's body about 30 minutes later. He never apologized, never even acted like it was his fault. He just stopped talking to everyone in the family and ignored us to our faces. He moved out in the middle of the night, stealing the mattress he was sleeping on to go to his aunt's house. 2 years later, we found him totally drunk, sleeping on our porch, covered in his own vomit. When I told him he had to go right now before someone found him and called the cops, he shouted, "Hate you, shrew at me," threw up all over the floor and my shoes, took his vomity jeans off on the deck, and wandered away. His name is basically a swear word in our house. It's been years, and honestly, I can't find it in myself to forgive him. He killed my Buster, and he didn't even have the decency to own up to it. Good deity, my dad, mom, myself would have literally tried to unalive him if he did that to one of our dogs. That's terrible. Do you think they were just lenient on him? Did they think that he would just be a good house guest to begin with? Or do you think they should have really laid some rules on him from the start? I mean, it sounds like they gave him more freedom than he really knew what to responsibly do with. What do you think? Story 2. Okay, so I know I'm stupid for even being in this situation, but I met a guy online. We were really clicking for a couple months when he asked if he could come see me. He tells me he doesn't have a car, so I'll need to pick him up at the bus station. That was fine with me, so I pick him up, expecting him to leave that night as we had planned. Turns out he had other plans. It was a Friday, and he hadn't purchased his ticket home until Tuesday and never told me how long he planned to stay. He was good looking, and the entire time he was there, he was on his phone. Took random pictures of my apartment and posted it on Facebook saying this was his vacation. I had a doctor's appointment the next day that I wasn't planning on him being in the way of. Against my better judgment, I left him there so I could go to my appointment. When I returned, I could hear him talking about some kind of strange business before I even hit the front door. He had also smoked a bunch of cigarettes in my apartment after being asked to go outside to do that. I was ticked, and that was the last straw. I told him we needed to talk and that I wasn't feeling him in any sort of way and that I wanted him out. He seemed shocked and kept insisting that he couldn't return home. There were no buses until Tuesday. It was Saturday at this point. He then said if I wanted to buy him a new ticket, he would go. I lied and told him I had bought a ticket and there was a bus leaving the station soon to his home 2 hours away. I got halfway to the bus station, and he claims he left his freaking gold clip in grill on my table in a paper towel, and he was not leaving town without it. I turned around to get it for him because he was so untidy and I was cleaning up after him. I had actually thrown away the grill in the paper towel and fished it out of the trash. We got to the bus station. He figured out I didn't buy a ticket and there were no buses going toward his home. I threatened to call the cops so he would get out of my car after an hour of arguing. Finally ditched that dude. Really didn't care what happened to him. Worst house guest ever. Again, you're meeting someone you've never met before. You need to set some ground rules. And yes, I know she admits that this situation was kind of her fault, that she should not have been in this, but you just need to talk and communicate ahead of time. When's your return ticket back? How long are you going to stay? And all of that stuff, because these people, he was just assuming, and she was just assuming too. A lot of assumption. Story 3. My aunt was going to stay with us for a couple months and find a job in our area. She's been living here ever since 2017 and only started looking for jobs in March of this year. And to be honest, I'm not fully sure she's actually applying to them because she hasn't had a single interview. She had a mental breakdown this past winter and thought her phone was being tapped, and we were all secretly recording her around the house. If she saw you holding your phone or near a phone, she'd rush out of the room. She came into my room uninvited once to check for recording devices in my smoke detector. At one point, she wasn't speaking to anyone and would write messages in a little notebook and burn them once they had been read. Sometimes she would start screaming for no reason. Sometimes it was hysterical crying, and sometimes she'd just stand and stare. One time I found her standing outside my bedroom door at 1 a.m. She would also stay up until 3 or 4 a.m. and just stare at the muted TV in the living room with all the lights on. It got to the point where I legitimately did not feel safe in my own house, but it's not like we could tell her to leave and put her on the street. She refused help for a long time, but she's fine now and sees a psych regularly. But I realized that even without the mental illness, I still hate being around her. She's a know-it-all. She's constantly interrupting. She's ever present to the point that I can't have financial discussions with my mom in person, and I have to text her about it instead. She literally follows me around the house and will stand in the kitchen watching me as I make myself lunch. I can't stand it. And being someone who doesn't have a job, she literally never leaves the house. Even when I think I'm alone, she's here, just being very quiet. She's probably going to live here until I'm passed on, because my parents don't have the backbone to ask her to leave. This is the third time a house guest has significantly overstayed their welcome. Too long didn't read? My aunt overstayed her welcome by a year and counting and had a paranoid breakdown over the winter that led to us feeling unsafe in our own home. Wow, this sounds awful for you. Hope it gets better soon. No, the sentence that sticks out in my mind is where he says, this is the third time a house guest has significantly overstayed their welcome. If the third person is this bad, I want to hear the stories about the other two. I want to know if they can post those two stories. Story 4. My aunt and her brother, let's call him AB, came over to visit my family. He was notoriously cheap. Like, He brought a rice cooker to a public bathroom to use the water and electricity to cook rice cheap. Although he was a millionaire, he's also been trying to set his daughters up with my brother, which is why he came over. We decided to buy 3 family-size Popeye sets and 3 gallons of OJ. Don't ask, variation. For 8 people lunch, thinking we'll have at least 1 set left over for my aunt to bring home for my uncle because Popeyes was very new to our state at the time. Between my family of 4, we maybe ate half a box of chicken, half of the sides that came with it, and half a quarter gallon of juice. AB proceeds to eat 2 full boxes of family-sized Popeyes, ate all the sides that came with it, and drank 2 gallons of juice. His wife had to stop him because he was eating so fast that she thought he was going to choke, and AB was giving dirty looks to people who went back for a second piece of chicken. After all that was consumed, he went to our bathroom and completely destroyed our toilet. Poop everywhere. On the toilet seat, under the toilet seat, rim of the toilet, on the ground around the toilet, and on our bathroom vanity side next to the toilet. He also clogged the toilet and tried to unclog it, I guess. The plunger was covered in feces and toilet paper on the ground. He walks downstairs like nothing happens and didn't say anything. He then proceeds to eat half a platter of fruit I had just served. I'm guessing it was probably 3 oranges, 2 apples, and a quarter of watermelon. I was very taken aback when I went to the bathroom and had to discreetly grab my mom to show her. I end up having to clean it up because my mom didn't want to make a scene of it. Still a bit traumatized. He wouldn't leave until we ordered a huge dinner for at least 12 people and proceeded to take all the food once it was brought home. He was never invited back to our house. Story 5. My husband's ex-coworker/friend. He gave us a sob story about how he had nowhere to live, no car, money, etc. So we gave him our upstairs rent-free, a job, gave him access to our car, and gave him groceries. He'd been a roommate before and was amazing, but he found his new girlfriend and raving with 18-year-olds at 26. He quit the job after we were close to firing him. Thank the deities because they'd be working out of town and he'd share a room with someone and blast music and turn on all the lights until 3 a.m. We found out he stole his dad's credit card to go see an out-of-town rave for him and his girlfriend. Didn't have a way there or back, just expected us to give him our car for the weekend. So after about a month of not doing anything to better his situation, we noticed this girl around more and more. Turns out he moved his girlfriend in without telling us and just expected us to include her in our generosity. We weren't impressed, and it got worse when I found empty pills in a drawer when I was looking for some documents that were in a drawer next to his bed. Didn't think this was a permanent situation at first. Then she very deliberately flashed her butt when she thought I couldn't see to my now husband while we were cuddling on the couch together. He nearly kicked them both out that night after that hogwash. I had to calm him down. We never told him about the incident. No freaking idea why, but my husband wouldn't let me, and we gave them a deadline to move out after that. I think the reasoning your husband followed regarding not telling his friend about his girlfriend flashing him her butt is that his friend would probably be depressed and more of a mess-up if he broke up with her and probably would try to use that to remain living with you. Story 6. My husband's mother. We haven't spoken to her in a few years. She was banished from every Catholic church within 100 miles of her home in southeast Michigan. She ended up going to a Korean church where nobody spoke English, so nobody dealt with her. She finally moved to Cincy and has been there ever since. She visited after I had my first daughter. She wouldn't freaking leave. She stayed for 2 weeks. She thought she was helping by going to Dollar Tree and finding organizers and completely rearranging my kitchen. I still randomly find things where they don't belong from her makeover. I also will toss my now deceased uncle in the ring as well. He took an Amtrak from Cali to Michigan after his brother, my other uncle, passed away. Dead of winter, and it ended up taking 5 days for them to arrive. He was about 6'4" and no less than 650 pounds. He brought his equally large and smelly son with him. I figured they would be in town for about a week. No biggie. Nope. They stayed at my house for 10 days until my husband told them to shower or get the hell out. I had to throw away my recliner he had been sitting on. He broke the tie rod to my husband's car and the CV to my minivan. We told him to go rent a U-Haul pickup to drive because I couldn't handle it anymore. He ended up staying nearly a month in town, but after 10 days, my husband's grandfather passed away and we had to go to Ohio for the funeral, so they had to leave. They stayed at my sister's house, and apparently they showered regularly, so she had no complaints. But her house always smells of wet dog and poop, so gross and gross. Again, assumptions. Everybody thinks it's family, so it's okay if I stay, right? We're all family. We're family, but you still smell. Get a shower or get out. That's sorry. Story 7. Some years ago, a girlfriend of mine visited me in the city I lived at that time. We slept at my boyfriend's place where he lives with a roommate. She was rude the whole time, making stupid jokes about the guys and said they couldn't cook just because they used powdered chicken brew as an ingredient. I escorted her to the rail station the next morning, but she forgot her phone charger and we hadn't enough time to get it before the train arrived. So my boyfriend rushed with his bicycle to bring it to us. She never once said thanks, not for the food they cooked her, nor for the provided bed, and not for her stupid charger. After 1 year passed, I decided to invite her again because my boyfriend and me moved together in a beautiful and amazing apartment. She came with her new lover, from which we never heard anything before, and her untrained dog. I didn't say anything as it climbed on our couch drenched in rain from outside, but what made me furious was her not batting an eye as her dog started to dig with its claws into our couch. Not only doesn't she respect other people or their effort for her and their belongings, but she is fully capable of raising and training an animal or caring for it. Her visits were the drop in the bucket to end this friendship. I couldn't take her personality any longer. Sorry, my English isn't good and I can't describe how awful she was. When I read my post, it seems pretty innocent, but I'm just lost for words and it makes me still mad thinking about it. She honestly sounds terrible, and your English is very good. Story 8. Not my house, but my car. I don't have many rules for passengers when I'm driving, but there are 2 I will never budge on. 1. Wear your seatbelt. 2. Do not smoke in my car. I had just bought a car. It wasn't brand new, but I knew the previous and only owner, and I knew he was a car guy who took meticulous care of his cars inside and out. He wouldn't even sell me the car before he had given the engine a proper service. Within a week of getting the car, a friend asked for a lift to the train station. I knew he smoked, so as we walked to the car, I told him specifically to wait until we get to the train station before he lights up. A 10-minute ride at most. I back out of the parking spot, drive to the exit of the parking lot, and as I check my left-hand side for oncoming cars, I hear from my right the distinctive sound of a lighter sparking up. Dude couldn't even freaking wait until we were out of the freaking car park before he just had to have his deity damn cigarette. I ask him what the heck he thinks he's doing and he just looks at me and says, "Relax, it's not like it's a new car." Sucker ended up walking to the train station. Satisfying. I don't let people lead or smoke in my car. It's not the greatest, but it's mine. I would have done the same thing. I agree with this one. When I drove rideshare in LA, that was one of the rules. That was actually one of the rules of the company. You can't drink or smoke in the cars, especially since I drove a rental. You wouldn't believe how many people would try to sneak in beers or cigarettes. And especially the vape people. Well, it's not smoking. Yeah, it's still vaping. It's still not allowed. So many people tried to sneak it in. And if I let them, I would get in trouble, especially drinking. Ugh. Story 9. I let my best friend stay with me when he became homeless. Over the course of the year he was there, he knocked a huge hole in the wall in his room. He repaired said hole and did an awful job. Did a horrendous paint job on the wall he knocked a hole in, got stains on all of the other walls because he worked at a factory and never washed his dang grubby hands. He also rarely showered. The stench from his room permeated the whole house, and he barely did anything to take care of the cat he brought with him, which I happily picked up the slack on. I love cats, and that cat was a sweetheart. He also left the stove burners on after he was done cooking several times. He'd forget to turn off lights. He had to have his coworker drive him to work for a reason I can't remember. He had a working vehicle, and most of the time he couldn't even wake up for work on time, so his coworker would come knocking on the front door, waking me up earlier than I had to be up. Disclaimer: I don't mean to say this guy was a jerk. He was actually very kind and apologetic when he broke something or messed up, and he kept to himself most of the time. He was just really unlucky and forgetful. Good on this person for helping someone that was about to become homeless, and good on them for having empathy on understanding why this person is the way he is. But buy a whiteboard, have a discussion, start setting stuff down. His habits are affecting the rest of the house. And does he forget to shower? Do you have to remind him of that? Story 10. My wife's 4 friends had stayed over after a party because they lived pretty far away. I was in the kitchen making coffee in the morning, and the friend's wife came up the basement stairs into the kitchen wearing nothing but her underwear. She didn't say anything to me. She just shuffled past and went back into the spare bedroom. I was curious what she was doing down there, so I went and I checked. It turns out, in her drunken state, she couldn't find either one of the bathrooms upstairs on the main floor, so she went into the basement and pooped beneath the stairs all over the floor. When her husband came out of the bedroom, I told him that he had a mess to clean up and directed him to the basement so he could find his wife's surprise. That's when he decided to use our clean bath towels to smear her poop all over my basement floor. Then he just tossed the towels into the laundry tub. I never spoke to either one of them again. One good thing did come out of it, though. We now get to say "poop the basement drunk" as the top of the drunkenness meter. Banned. What the hell? That's absolutely horrible.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 11. My brother-in-law. He's the most socially awkward person I know, and as a result, he's almost unbearable to host because he's obsessed with food. He wakes up thinking about what to have for breakfast, while also planning what he'll have for his other meals. While eating, he'll also tell you about how the food could be made better, which doesn't really stop him from eating everything he sees. Seriously, he thinks leftovers are a sin, I think. He's not quiet about bodily noises, mouth breathing while chewing, belching, snorting, blowing his nose, etc. It's gross. He's pretty short with my kids, 5-year-old twins. He'll go from happy-go-lucky uncle to yelling at them in about half a second. When he goes to the bathroom, he's in there for about 40 minutes, not exaggerating. While in there, he'll also be watching YouTube on his phone without headphones, volume blasting. He falls asleep with all the lights on and his phone still playing YouTube. He listens to music/TV on his phone without headphones, regardless of what anyone else is doing. He makes regular commentary on what you're watching/talking about, and if you're watching a movie, he'll constantly quote it and guffaw when he's right. Story 12. My now ex-husband and I rented a room to one of his coworkers. His coworker never washed his hands, so there would be dirty handprints on every railing or door handle from the front door up to his room. He never showered. He would have a bath roughly once a week. This left my white tub a gray color with a black ring all around the top. He never flushed, so this left my white toilet a nasty brown color. The first time I saw the bathroom after he had been there for a week or so, I cried. He smelled awful. He played hockey a couple times a week, but still would just have a bath about once a week, so it was very hard to be around him if he wanted to spend time out of his room. He never cooked, just ate chips or fast food in his room and left the garbage in there until my husband would tell him it was time to clean it out before we got bugs. It was awful. What kind of work do they do? The husband doesn't seem to have any problem staying clean. The wife seems to tolerate him. And again, what's with not flushing? Do you not get the odor? Do you think it's just not your responsibility? I don't get it. Story 13. A distant in-law asked to stay with us along with his pregnant wife. They were having issues with people from the past and wanted to get away. When they got here, we realized they didn't intend on going back. We discussed they'd stay a month, and after that they needed to chip in. Dude sat on my couch for a month watching Netflix while his overdue prego wife cleaned the house while I was at work. Eventually, me and the wife found him a job, and the baby was born. My significant other tells him, "Hey, a month is up. If you're going to stay, we need half of rent and utilities." He got offended that we stuck to the agreed-upon plan instead of letting him mooch. We thought he'd take his family back home, but they stayed in town. When they moved out, I found their placenta in a drawer. That really took a left turn at the last line. Story 14. I was in kindergarten, and my brothers invited a friend over to play the newest Madden game. After they got done playing, the friend decided to go home, so my mom drove him. While he left, my brothers told my dad that our Madden game was missing. We spent a good time looking for it, but couldn't find it. My dad believed my brother's friend took it, so he went over to his house and, what do you know? He stole it. He was banned from the house and the friendship ended. I never liked him, to be honest, since I was too young to care about friendship. My daughter had a friend like that, only it was her own mother who caught her stealing from us and made her write an apology letter. I accepted it, but never had her over again, and shed no tears when she moved away soon after that. Story 15. Had a roommate in college who decided to let his brother come and stay with us for close to a month. These two buttholes did nothing but drink 40s and play Madden all day. The worst was when I came home to find a crock pot of chili I made for a work party completely devoured, with the note still on the lid asking for it to not be eaten. When I called them on that hogwash, they both tried to pick a fight with me. One night they go out, get scat-faced, and the brother brings home the single trashiest woman I have ever seen in my life, and then proceeds to have very loud and smelly intimacy on the couch in the living room. I moved out a month later. I'm sorry I had to deal with that hogwash, but loud and smelly intimacy had me in tears of laughter. Story 16. My parents were kind of broke when I was young, and because of that, one summer for around a month, all I had to wear on my feet were these tatty old boots with holes in the soles, and when they got wet, they made my feet super smelly. Well, it was a particularly hot summer, and I was around 13. After being out doing normal kid stuff, my friend invited me to stay at his for the night. Come the end of the night, I take the boots off in the room I'm staying in and go to bed. As I'm drifting off, the dad peeks in as he's going to bed and says, "You are one smelly little boy." I was their worst house guest. My son has friends like this, and I'm pretty sure my son's feet smell too. It's normal. Story 17. I used to have a regular dinner get-together with a friend and her boyfriend on Sundays, alternating between her place and mine. When we went to her place, she'd be super anal about keeping the place clean, making us clean up before we left, which was fine, whatever. They'd come over to my place, and the two of them would be slobs. I guess because we weren't as tidy as she was, so why bother? The worst offense being when she dropped a French fry and started grinding it into the carpet with her foot. I told her to stop, and she just said, whatever, the place is a mess anyways. Added bonus that eventually she stopped having me over because she didn't want to have to deal with cleaning. Story 18. My parents. So many rigid rules about everything in their house with the added, "You will obey the rules of my house or leave" attitude. They come to my house, and especially my dad, treats it however he wants. Muddy shoes? He's okay walking on your carpets. Tired? He's not, so you aren't going to bed, nor is he leaving. Hungry? They'll demand you cater to their wants, even when they aren't invited to eat. It was at that point I realized it wasn't the house rules he wanted followed, but himself. You need to take a page out of his book. You will obey the rules of my house or leave. I don't give a care who you are. No one disrespects me in my own home. Story 19. I had a family member come stay with us for a few weeks. We had the spare bedroom upstairs set up and ready for them with a bed and TV. Said family member decided the spare bedroom wasn't good enough and decided to turn the entire lower floor where our entertainment room is into their own apartment instead. They didn't use the bed a single time. That was pretty infuriating. When I was a kid/teenager, I always insisted it was fine I could just sleep on the couch. Someone else could have the bed so no one had to share. Now as an adult who has couch guests, it occurs to me how much of an inconvenience someone crashing in your living room is. Story 20. My in-laws. They're both inconsiderate slobs. Father-in-law has to monopolize the TV 24/7, while mother-in-law won't lift a finger to clean up after herself. Also, once she was making herself a sandwich, licked the mayonnaise off of her knife, which she then proceeded to stick in the mustard jar. Add to that, she'll never offer to pay, meaning she'll never just say, "I've got this, put your money away." She'll instead ask with this weak tone in her voice, "Do you want me to pay for that?" Because she knows if she asks that way, my wife will say no. It annoys the hell out of both of us. I always answer questions like that with, "If you would like to, I would appreciate it." Story 21. A friend of my husband's. He was the house guest that never wanted to leave. He has a wife and kid, but still insisted on coming over to our house every day for hours at a time without them. He was borderline stalkerish, called my husband at least 10 times a day when he wasn't over, which wasn't often. It's like he wanted to be married to my husband and not his wife. He was the most annoying house guest ever who never wanted to leave us alone. Guy probably hated being at home and didn't have any other friends. Kinda sad, actually. Story 22. A friend stayed over after a night of partying, as we were in no state to drive. During the night, my flat got flooded. He watched me clean up the water for a couple of hours with his feet up on the sofa, smoking my cigarettes. Then he had the audacity to tell me, "Bro, drop me home, I'm getting bored." "Mother friender, walk home." Frickin' hell. Wow, I feel so bad for you. I'd be on my hands and knees trying to help. Probably make it worse, but at least I'd try. Story 23. My roommate's boyfriend thought all the meat in my freezer was expired and threw it away. When I came home from work, it was too late. It was a hot day, and he did this right after I left for work, so the meat was not salvageable. Hundreds of dollars of perfectly good meat gone to waste. Needless to say, I was ticked, and I made him buy me new meat. I'm so glad someone in this thread got their stuff back. Story 24. We allowed a friend of ours to stay the night once because he was down on his luck. He proceeded to invite his girlfriend over to stay the night without asking us, and they were laughing and being loud late into the night while I was trying to sleep. I had work early the next morning. Needless to say, he never came over again. They totally were intimate on your couch. Story 25. My mother-in-law. Particularly because she showed up uninvited and let herself in with a copy of our keys she'd got made when my significant other left them there. Then proceeded to blame us for her copying her key because family should be allowed to walk in and out as they please. Story 26. My mother's sister. My parents and her went on a night out, came back. Most of us were asleep. Mom went to bed. She ended up having spicy time with my dad. Long story short, she's not a good house guest. Yeah, and sorry to say it, but your dad kinda sucks too. Story 27. I had family come over that couldn't control their freaking kids. The little rugrats were trying to see who could beat the record of jumping from the highest point in the stairs to my bottom floor. Story 28. The house guests that rearranged our furniture and artwork while we were away to surprise us with their good taste.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.